The Keth-Moran had always been different from other species in the galaxy. While most civilizations built their power through war and conquest, the Keth-Moran chose a different path. They believed in peace above all else. Their technology worked with living things instead of destroying them. Their ships were grown, not built. Their cities breathed with the rhythm of nature itself. For thousands of years, the Keth-Moran had lived quietly on their homeworld of Velthara. The planet was covered in vast crystal forests that sang in the wind. Rivers of pure water flowed between gardens that had been tended for centuries. The Keth-Moran had learned to live as part of their world, not as its masters. Their society was built on the principle of absolute harmony. They had no armies because they had no enemies. They had no weapons because they chose not to fight. When other species came to their world seeking trade or knowledge, the Keth-Moran welcomed them with open arms. They shared their wisdom freely and asked for nothing in return. But the galaxy was not a peaceful place. Two great powers ruled most of the known worlds. The hegemony controlled the core systems with iron discipline and advanced technology. The Federation spread across the outer rim with their massive fleets and industrial might. For decades, these two empires had grown stronger while smaller species either joined one side or were crushed between them. The war began over a disputed mining system rich in rare crystals. Both empires claimed the worlds as their own. Diplomatic talks failed. Trade negotiations collapsed. Soon, ships were burning in the void between stars. As the conflict spread, refugees began fleeing the war zones. Families packed what they could carry and searched for safe places to hide. Colonies that had existed for generations were abandoned overnight. Millions of beings found themselves homeless, caught between two massive war machines that cared nothing for innocent lives. The Keth-Moran watched this suffering with growing concern. Their leaders met in the great council chambers beneath the crystal trees. They debated what their people should do. Some argued they should stay hidden and protect themselves. Others believed they had a duty to help those in need. Elder Cylin, the oldest and wisest of their people, stood before the council. Her voice was soft but clear as she spoke. "We have always believed that all life is sacred. Can we close our eyes to this pain? Can we let fear make us forget who we are?" The council voted to act. They opened their borders to refugees from both sides of the war. Keth-Moran ships began appearing at the edges of battle zones, offering rescue to anyone who needed help. They didn't ask which side the refugees had supported. They didn't care about politics or allegiances. They only saw beings in need. Their bioships were perfect for this work. The living vessels could stretch and grow to hold more passengers. They could produce food and clean water during long journeys. Most importantly, they carried no weapons, making it clear the Keth-Moran came in peace. At first, both empires ignored these rescue missions. They were too busy fighting each other to worry about one small species helping refugees. But as the war dragged on and more people began seeking sanctuary with the Keth-Moran, the military leaders started to pay attention. The hegemony demanded that the Keth-Moran stop helping Federation refugees. The Federation insisted they stop aiding hegemony citizens. Both sides threatened consequences if their orders were not followed. The Keth-Moran ignored both demands and continued their rescue work. Then came the day that changed everything. A massive battle erupted near the Keth-Moran border. Hundreds of ships from both fleets clashed in a desperate fight. The Keth-Moran rescue vessels moved through the wreckage, pulling survivors from damaged ships. They saved hegemony soldiers and Federation Marines without distinction. A hegemony admiral named Corex was among those rescued. He had been badly injured when his command ship exploded. The Keth-Moran healers worked for days to save his life. When he recovered, he expected to be questioned about military secrets or used as a bargaining chip. Instead, the Keth-Moran simply asked if he wanted to return to his people or seek asylum. Corex was confused and angry. In his world, enemies were either conquered or destroyed. The idea that someone would risk themselves to save their enemy made no sense to him. He demanded to speak with their military commanders. The Keth-Moran explained they had no military. He asked to see their weapons. They showed him their gardens. When Corex finally returned to hegemony space, he brought a disturbing report to his superiors. The Keth-Moran were not just helping refugees, they were challenging the very foundation of galactic order. If word spread that a species could survive without armies, without conquest, without choosing sides in the great game of power, other worlds might start asking dangerous questions. The Federation leadership reached the same conclusion. Their agents reported that Kethmaran rescued refugees were telling stories of a different way of life. Soldiers who had seen the crystal forest spoke of beauty beyond imagination. Civilians described a world where no one went hungry, and everyone had a voice in their government. Both empires realized the Kethmaran represented a threat to their authority. Not a military threat, but something far more dangerous. They threatened the idea that might makes right. They proved that another way was possible. The Galactic Council had been formed centuries ago to maintain order among the various species. In practice, it was controlled by the two great powers. Minor species had voices but little real influence. Important decisions were made in backroom deals between hegemony and federation. Representatives, when the council was called to address the Kethmaran problem, the session was closed to outside observers. The debate lasted for hours. Some smaller species tried to defend the Kethmaran, arguing that helping refugees was not a crime, but the great powers had made their decision. The charges read like a catalog of crimes that weren't really crimes. The Kethmaran were accused of undermining galactic stability by refusing to choose sides. They were charged with interfering in legitimate conflicts by saving lives. Most seriously, they were found guilty of promoting dangerous ideologies by simply existing as they always had. The sentence was exile, not just from their homeworld, but from all council space. Any species that offered them aid would face the same punishment. Any world that traded with them would be cut off from galactic commerce. The Kethmaran had become officially unwelcome in the galaxy they had tried so hard to help. Elder Silin received the news in her garden, surrounded by flowers that had bloomed for 1,000 years. She was old now, her once bright scales faded to silver, but her eyes still held the wisdom and sadness of her entire people. The evacuation began immediately. Kethmaran bioships landed in every city and settlement on Velthara. Families packed their most precious belongings and said goodbye to homes that had sheltered their ancestors for generations. The crystal forests sang a mournful song as the ships lifted off, carrying an entire civilization into the unknown darkness of space. Behind them, hegemony and Federation fleets moved into Kethmaran space. They would claim the beautiful world and strip it of resources, just as they had done to so many others. The gardens would be plowed under for mining operations. The crystal forest would be harvested for their valuable minerals. In time, nothing would remain to show that the Kethmaran had ever existed there. The exile fleet consisted of nearly 1,000 bioships carrying almost 4 million souls. They had become refugees themselves, cast out from the only home they had ever known. But even in their darkest hour, the Kethmaran held to their principles. They would not seek revenge. They would not abandon their beliefs. They would find a new home somewhere beyond the reach of those who feared what they represented. Elder Silin stood on the bridge of the lead ship, watching her homeworld shrink to a point of light behind them. Around her, the ship's living walls pulsed gently, trying to comfort her grief. She placed a withered hand on the warm surface and whispered a promise that her people would survive, that their way of life would continue, that somewhere among the distant stars they would find a place where peace could flourish once again. The exile had begun 43 years ago. For over 4 decades, the Kethmaran fleet had wandered the edge of known space, searching for a new home. They had found nothing but rejection, fear, and slowly dying hope. Commander Thelrain had been just a child when the ships left Velthara. Now he was middle-aged, his scales bearing the gray tinge that came to his people in times of great stress. He stood in the bioship's nerve center, studying reports that told the same story they had been hearing for years. Another system had refused them sanctuary. Another world had turned them away. The fleet had grown smaller over the years. Some ships had simply disappeared in the vast emptiness between stars. Others had suffered critical failures that their depleted resources couldn't repair. The worst losses came from despair. Entire family groups had chosen to put themselves into the long sleep, rather than face another year of endless wandering. Thelrain's own ship, the Harmony's Dream, had once housed 12,000 souls. Now fewer than 8,000 remained in its living chambers. The ship itself showed signs of the long exile. Its organic hull had grown thin in places where it couldn't regenerate properly. The food gardens produced smaller harvests each season. The air recycling systems wheezed with fatigue. "Sir," called Navigator Kessin from her station, "we're receiving another transmission from the Alterian Republic." Thelrain sighed. The Alterians controlled a cluster of mining worlds 3 days away. It had taken weeks to convince them to even consider the Keth request for sanctuary. Let me guess. They're very sorry, but they can't risk galactic sanctions. Actually, sir, it's worse than that. Kessen's voice was heavy with disappointment. They say the hegemony has threatened to blockade their trade routes if they even allow us to take on supplies. The commander felt a familiar weight settle on his shoulders. The great powers had not forgotten about the exiled Keth. Wherever the fleet went, warnings followed. Sometimes the threats were subtle, hints about trade agreements being reconsidered. Other times they were direct. 3 years ago, a Federation squadron had actually fired on a merchant vessel suspected of selling food to the exile fleet. Plot a course for the Sigma Persei system, Thelrain ordered. Maybe the Independents there will be more willing to negotiate. Sir, called another voice from across the chamber. It was Engineer Malseth, a young woman who maintained the ship's biomechanical systems. I need to report something. The protein synthesis chambers are showing signs of critical stress. If we don't find a suitable planet soon, we'll start losing food production entirely. Thelrain closed his eyes. This was the nightmare that haunted every Kethmoran commander. Their bioships were living creatures that needed to rest and heal on planetary surfaces. In the old days, the fleet would have landed on Velthara every few years for regeneration cycles. Without a homeworld, the ships were slowly dying. How long do we have? He asked. Maybe 6 months before we start seeing ship failures, Malseth replied. A year at most before the situation becomes critical. The chamber fell silent except for the soft heartbeat rhythm of the ship's organic systems. Everyone understood what those words meant. The Kethmoran had faced many hardships in their exile, but they had always found ways to survive. This was different. This was a deadline that couldn't be negotiated with or avoided, perhaps. It's time to consider the option we've all been avoiding, said a quiet voice from the back of the chamber. Thelrain turned to see Elder Yulmarin, one of the few survivors from the original Homeworld Council. She was ancient now, her scales pure white with age, but her mind remained sharp. She rarely spoke in fleet meetings, but when she did, people listened. What option is that, Elder? Thelrain asked, though he suspected he knew the answer. Surrender, she said simply. Return to Council space and accept whatever punishment they choose to give us. At least some of our people might survive. The word hung in the air like a poison cloud. Surrender meant abandoning everything the Kethmoran had fought to preserve. It meant admitting that their way of life was wrong, that peace and compassion were naive dreams that had no place in the real galaxy. The hegemony would never allow us to exist as we are, objected Chief Healer Vendes. They would scatter our people across a dozen worlds, forbid us from practicing our beliefs, force our children to accept their ways. But they would live, Elder Yulmarin replied. Is that not better than watching them die slowly in these failing ships? The debate continued for hours, as it had many times before. Some argued for finding a way to fight back, though the Kethmoran had no weapons and no knowledge of warfare. Others suggested splitting the fleet, hoping smaller groups might find acceptance where the entire population had been rejected. A few proposed the unthinkable idea of raiding inhabited worlds for the resources they needed. But every option led to the same conclusion. The Kethmoran were trapped by their own principles. They could not take what they needed by force. They could not defend themselves through violence. They could not abandon their beliefs to gain acceptance. They were dying because they refused to become something they were not. As the meeting broke up without resolution, Thelrain found himself alone in his private chambers. The walls here were covered with bioluminescent panels that could display images from the ship's memory banks. He called up a recording from the early days of exile, when the fleet had still been strong and hopeful. The image showed Elder Silin addressing the gathered refugees soon after leaving Velthara. Her voice was clear and strong as she spoke of their duty to preserve the Kethmoran way of life, no matter what challenges they faced. She spoke of a future where their descendants would thank them for staying true to their beliefs. Silin had died 12 years ago, worn down by the stress of leading a dying people. But her words still carried weight among the fleet. Thelrain wondered what she would say now, faced with the choice between extinction and surrender. A soft chime indicated an incoming message from the fleet's other ships. Captain Northek of the Peaceful Dawn was reporting another reactor failure. Captain Yelmarine of the Growing Light needed medical supplies for a spreading illness among her crew. Commander Tekshan of the Verdant Hope was requesting permission to reduce life support to the minimum levels to conserve energy. Each message was another weight on Thelrain's shoulders. He was responsible for these people, but he had no good options left to offer them. The galaxy had made its decision about the Kethmoran. They were unwanted, unwelcome, and slowly running out of time. In desperation, Thelrain called up the star charts on his wall display. Beyond the rim of council space lay unexplored regions where no one knew what they might find. Most species avoided those areas because they were dangerous and unprofitable. But for the Kethmoran, they might represent one last chance. Set course for the outer spiral arm, he ordered the Night Watch. Take us beyond the edge of the known galaxy. It was a gamble that could cost them everything. The unknown regions were filled with unstable stars, rogue planets, and cosmic phenomena that could destroy a ship without warning. But staying in known space was a slow death sentence. Out there in the darkness beyond civilization's reach, maybe they could find something that had escaped the notice of the great powers. As the fleet changed course toward the galactic rim, Thelrain tried to hold on to hope. Somewhere among the billions of stars ahead, there might be a world where the Kethmoran could make a new beginning. All they had to do was survive long enough to find it. The scanner readings made no sense. Navigator Kessin checked her instruments 3 times before she believed what they were telling her. After months of traveling through empty space beyond the galactic rim, the exile fleet had finally found something extraordinary. Commander Thelrain to the navigation center. Priority urgent, she announced over the ship's communication system. Thelrain arrived quickly, still adjusting his duty robes. His scales had grown even grayer during the long journey into the unknown. The stress of leading a dying people was taking its toll on him, as it had on all the fleet commanders. "What do you have for me, Kessin?" he asked. She pointed to the display screen showing their sensor readings. "Sir, we've detected energy signatures from a star system approximately 4 light-years ahead. The patterns are unlike anything in our databases." Thelrain studied the data. The energy readings were definitely artificial, indicating some form of technological civilization. But the power levels were surprisingly low for a spacefaring species. More puzzling, the signals seemed to be coming from just one planet in the system, not from space stations or asteroid mining operations. "Could it be a trap?" asked Chief Security Officer Nalveth. Even the peaceful Kethmoran had learned to be cautious during their long exile. "The great powers might have agents out here waiting for us." "Unlikely," Kessin replied. "These signals show technological patterns we've never seen before. Primitive nuclear fusion, basic electromagnetic communications, early chemical rockets. This looks like a species that has just begun to explore space." Thelrain felt a flutter of hope in his chest. A young civilization would not yet be part of the Galactic Council. They wouldn't know about the Kethmoran exile or fear retribution for helping them. But approaching them carried its own risks. First contact with a primitive species was strictly regulated by council law. Just making contact could be seen as another crime. "Sir," interrupted Engineer Molseth from the engineering station, "I hate to add pressure, but we're reaching critical levels on several systems. The growing light reports complete failure of their main bioreactor. The Peaceful Dawn has lost atmospheric recycling on 3 levels. If we don't find somewhere to land soon, we'll start losing ships." The commander looked around the navigation center. Every face showed the same mixture of hope and desperation. They had been running for so long that the idea of stopping seemed almost impossible to imagine. But they were out of options and nearly out of time. "Send a message to all fleet commanders," Thelrain decided. "We're going to investigate this system. Full stealth protocols. If these beings are as primitive as they appear, we don't want to panic them." The Kethmoran fleet moved slowly toward the strange new system. Their bioships were designed to avoid detection by merging with the natural background radiation of space. To most scanners, they would appear to be nothing more than cosmic debris or small asteroids. As they got closer, the ship's sensors began to paint a clearer picture of what they had found. The system contained 8 planets orbiting a stable yellow star. The 3rd planet was covered in liquid water and showed strong signs of biological activity. But most importantly, it was home to a species that was clearly intelligent but not yet advanced enough to be a threat. "They're calling themselves humans," reported Communications Officer Velthara, monitoring the planet's radio transmissions. "They have multiple political groups scattered across their world's surface, Their technology appears to be roughly equivalent to what the Council species had about 3,000 years ago. Thelrain studied the data flowing in from the sensor stations. The planet looked beautiful from space, with blue oceans and green landmasses covered in clouds. It reminded him of old recordings of Velthara before the exile, but he forced himself to focus on practical matters. "What about planetary defenses?" he asked. "Minimal," replied Chief Security Officer Nalveth. "They have some orbital monitoring equipment and basic missile systems, but nothing that could threaten our ships. They've barely reached their own moon." Population? Approximately 8 billion individuals concentrated in urban areas across all continents. They appear to be in the early stages of industrialization with significant environmental challenges. Thelrain nodded, a young species struggling with the growing pains of technological advancement. The Kethmoran had been through similar stages in their own development thousands of years ago. But what caught his attention was something else in the data. "Velthara, you said they have multiple political groups. Are they at war?" "Not currently, sir, but there are significant tensions. They've recently developed nuclear weapons and appear to be in some kind of standoff. However," she paused, checking her readings again, "they also show remarkable cooperation on some projects. They've built a space station together and are collaborating on scientific research." That was interesting. A species capable of both conflict and cooperation. It suggested they might be mature enough to handle contact with an alien civilization, even if they weren't advanced enough to threaten the Kethmoran. "Sir," called Engineer Molseth, "the gentle current is reporting critical bioreactor failure. They need to land within the next 48 hours or they'll lose life support." The deadline had arrived. Thelrain could delay no longer. Either they made contact with this human species and hoped for the best, or they watched their people die one ship at a time. "All stations, prepare for first contact protocols," he announced. "Communications, start monitoring all their radio frequencies. I want to know how they react to our presence. Science teams, analyze their languages and prepare translation matrices. Engineering, identify potential landing sites that won't disrupt their population centers." The fleet moved closer to the human planet, still maintaining stealth, but preparing for the moment when they would reveal themselves. In the communication center, specialists worked frantically to decode human languages and understand their cultural patterns. What they found was both encouraging and puzzling. The humans had many different languages and cultures, often in conflict with each other. But they also showed remarkable creativity and adaptability. Their art was beautiful, their science was advancing rapidly, and their philosophy included concepts that the Kethmoran recognized as similar to their own beliefs about peace and cooperation. "Sir," reported Velthara, "I found something unusual in their communications. They have extensive fiction about contact with alien species. They've actually spent considerable time thinking about what they would do if they encountered beings from other worlds." "And what have they concluded?" Thelrain asked. "It varies, sir. Some of their stories show fear and conflict, but many others show curiosity and hope. They seem to have a concept of offering aid to those in need, even if those beings are different from themselves." Thelrain felt a spark of hope. Maybe, just maybe, these humans would be different from the species that had rejected the Kethmoran. Maybe they would see refugees in need rather than threats to be avoided. "Commander," interrupted the sensor station, "we're being scanned. The humans have detected our fleet." This was the moment of truth. Within hours, the humans would know they were not alone in the universe. The question was how they would react to the discovery that a fleet of dying refugees had appeared in their system. "Open a channel to all ships," Thelrain ordered. "This is it, everyone. After 43 years of exile, we're about to find out if there's still a place in the universe for people like us." On the main display screen, the blue and green planet grew larger as the fleet moved into orbit. Somewhere on that world, humans were looking at their own screens and seeing alien ships for the first time. In the next few hours, both species would discover what the future held for them. The detection had happened at exactly 14:32 GMT on a Tuesday afternoon. Dr. Sarah Chen was reviewing data from the Deep Space Monitoring Array when her coffee cup froze halfway to her lips. The signals on her screen showed dozens of objects moving in formation toward Earth's outer system. They were too large to be asteroids, too organized to be natural phenomena, and far too advanced to be human-made. "Control, this is Deep Space Station 7, she radioed to mission headquarters. I need immediate confirmation on target classification. We have multiple unknown objects approaching the outer system. Within minutes, every space monitoring facility on Earth was focused on the same impossible sight. 37 vessels of unknown design were moving toward Earth, at speeds that human technology couldn't match. The objects appeared to be biological in nature, with flowing curves and organic patterns that looked more grown than built. President Martinez was woken from his sleep to receive the emergency briefing. Prime Minister Chen was pulled out of a trade summit. The head of the European Space Consortium abandoned her daughter's birthday party to rush to mission control. Within 6 hours, every major world leader was staring at the same question. What did these visitors want? The objects have maintained a consistent approach vector, reported General Harrison, head of Earth's Unified Space Defense Command. No hostile actions detected, no weapon signatures. They're not answering our communication attempts, but they're also not showing any signs of aggression. Dr. James Wright, Earth's leading expert on theoretical alien contact, studied the sensor readings with growing amazement. Look at these ships, he said, pointing to the holographic display. They're not using conventional propulsion. The energy signature suggests some kind of biological technology we can't even imagine. Are they a threat? Asked President Martinez. That was the question everyone wanted answered. Unknown, sir, replied General Harrison. But if they wanted to hurt us, they probably could have done it already. These ships are clearly more advanced than anything we have. The debate continued for hours in secure conference rooms around the world. Some officials wanted to scramble every available fighter and prepare for invasion. Others argued for attempting peaceful contact. A few suggested hiding and hoping the aliens would go away. But it was Dr. Chen who noticed something important in the sensor data. Look at this, she said, highlighting specific readings on her screen. These ships are showing signs of damage and stress. Some of them are barely holding together. This doesn't look like an invasion fleet. It looks like refugees. The word refugees changed everything. Suddenly, the world leaders weren't looking at an alien invasion. They were looking at people in need of help. It was President Martinez who made the decision that would reshape human history. Send them a message, he ordered. Tell them we know they're there. Ask if they need assistance. The message was simple and transmitted on multiple frequencies. Unknown vessels, this is Earth. We see you and we want to help. Do you need assistance? For 6 hours there was no response. The alien ships continued their approach, moving slowly and carefully as if they were as nervous about first contact as the humans were. Then, just as Earth's sun was setting over the Pacific Ocean, the reply came. The voice that spoke was clearly artificial, probably some kind of translation device. But the words it spoke in perfect English would be remembered by every human who heard them. People of Earth, we are the Keth Moran. We are refugees fleeing persecution in our home galaxy. Our ships are failing and our people are dying. We ask not for conquest or dominance, but only for a chance to rest and heal. If you will permit us, we wish to speak with your leaders. The message was repeated in dozens of human languages. Chinese, Spanish, Arabic, Hindi, Russian, and more. Somehow, in just a few hours, these aliens had learned enough about human communication to speak to the entire world. Dr. Wright was the first to break the stunned silence in mission control. They learned our languages from our radio transmissions. That level of linguistic analysis suggests incredible intelligence, but they're using it to ask for help, not to demand submission. President Martinez made another decision that surprised everyone. Instead of secret negotiations or military responses, he ordered the alien message to be broadcast to the entire world. Within an hour, every human on Earth knew that aliens existed and that they were asking for help. The response was unlike anything the world's leaders had expected. Instead of panic and chaos, something extraordinary happened. Offers of assistance began pouring in from every nation on Earth. Scientists volunteered to share their knowledge. Engineers offered to help repair alien technology. Ordinary citizens organized fundraising drives to help the refugees. Sir, reported Martinez's chief of staff, we're receiving offers of support from every major nation and most of the minor ones. The public response is overwhelmingly positive. People want to help. It was the Japanese who made the first practical offer. Prime Minister Nakamura announced that Japan would open its deep space communication arrays to help establish better contact with the alien fleet. The Russians offered the use of their largest spaceport for landing operations. The Europeans proposed sharing their most advanced medical technology. But it was a group of children from a school in Kenya who sent the message that moved the world. A class of 8-year-olds had recorded a simple video message: "Welcome to Earth. We hope you can stay safe here." Dr. Chen found herself assigned to the first contact team, along with representatives from every major spacefaring nation. Their job was to establish formal communication with the Keth Moran and learn what kind of help they needed. The aliens' response was swift and grateful. They identified their lead ship and requested permission to send a small shuttle to meet with human representatives. The location chosen was the International Space Station, neutral territory that belonged to all humanity. Commander Thelrain himself led the Keth Moran delegation. When he emerged from the organic shuttle in the ISS docking bay, the humans got their first close look at an alien being. He was tall and slender, with scales that shifted color slightly in the light. His large eyes showed intelligence and sadness in equal measure. "I am Commander Thelrain of the Exile Fleet," he said through his translation device. "I speak for nearly 4 million Keth Moran who have wandered the galaxy for 43 years, seeking a place where we can live in peace." Dr. Chen stepped forward as Earth's primary representative. "I am Dr. Sarah Chen, speaking for the people of Earth. We welcome you and want to understand how we can help." What followed was the most important conversation in human history. Thelrain explained the Keth Moran philosophy of peace and cooperation. He described their exile from the galaxy and their desperate search for a new home. He showed the humans images of their dying bioships and spoke of the choice between extinction and abandoning their beliefs. "We have no weapons to threaten you with," he said. "We have no armies to conquer you. We seek only a chance to survive as we are, not as others would make us." The human delegation was moved by his story. These weren't invaders or colonizers. They were people fleeing persecution for the crime of being peaceful in a violent universe. Dr. Chen found herself thinking of Earth's own refugees, people who had fled war and oppression seeking safety in foreign lands. "What do you need from us?" she asked. "Time," Thelrain replied. "Our ships need to rest on planetary surfaces to heal and regenerate. Our people need space to build new communities. We ask for nothing that would harm your world or your people. We only ask for the chance to exist." The negotiations continued for days. The Keth Moran shared their technology freely, showing humans advances in biotechnology, environmental science, and sustainable living that could help solve many of Earth's problems. In return, humans offered them refuge and partnership. Some governments raised concerns about the risks of accepting millions of aliens. But the public support was overwhelming. Protests formed around the world, not against the aliens but in support of them. Signs reading "Welcome Keth Moran" appeared in dozens of languages. Children drew pictures of humans and aliens working together. It was President Martinez who announced the final decision to the world. "The Keth Moran have asked us for help and we will give it. Not because we have to, but because it's the right thing to do. Today, Earth becomes a sanctuary world for those seeking peace." The first Keth Moran bioships began landing in remote areas selected to minimize disruption to human populations. Desert regions, tundra, and deep ocean areas that humans rarely used became the sites of new communities. The aliens worked quickly but carefully, creating settlements that enhanced rather than damaged their environments. Commander Thelrain stood on the shore of a lake in northern Canada, watching his people emerge from their ships for the first time in over 4 decades. Children who had been born in exile finally felt solid ground beneath their feet. Elders who had given up hope of ever finding a home wept tears of joy. "Sir," called Navigator Kesson, approaching with a group of human scientists, "the humans want to know if we're ready to begin the integration." "Protocols." Thelrain looked across the lake where human and Keth Moran engineers were already working together to establish communication networks. In the distance, he could see children from both species playing together. The message arrived on a Tuesday morning, delivered by a hegemony courier ship that appeared without warning at the edge of Earth's solar system. The captain was Corex, the same admiral who had been rescued by the Keth Moran decades earlier. Now he wore the black uniform of a special operations commander, and his expression was grim. "This is Admiral Corex of the Hegemony Special Fleet," he announced on all frequencies. "I carry an official message from the Galactic Council for the Government of Earth." President Martinez received the message in the underground command center that had been built. After the Keth Moran arrival, 5 years had passed since first contact, and Earth had changed dramatically. Human cities now featured bioorganic buildings grown with Kethmoran technology. The atmosphere was cleaner thanks to alien environmental systems. Medicine had advanced by centuries, and humanity was preparing for their first journey to other star systems. The message was formal and cold. The Galactic Council had discovered that Earth was harboring the exiled Kethmoran. This was considered a violation of galactic law and a threat to universal order. Earth had 48 hours to surrender all Kethmoran refugees for proper processing, or face the consequences. "What does proper processing mean?" asked Dr. Chen, who had become Earth's chief alien affairs coordinator. Commander Thelrain's expression was dark. "It means death or forced assimilation. The Council will scatter my people across 100 worlds, forbid us from maintaining our culture, and ensure we can never again challenge their authority." President Martinez looked around the command center. Representatives from every major nation were present, along with Kethmoran leaders and human military commanders. The decision they made in the next few hours would determine the future of both species. "How much time do we have before their main fleet arrives?" asked General Harrison. "Based on the courier ship's origin point, approximately 6 days, replied Admiral Sarah Kim, who now commanded Earth's combined space forces. The fleet had grown considerably since the Kethmoran arrival, incorporating both human engineering and alien biotechnology. "What are we facing?" Martinez asked. Admiral Corex had requested permission to address Earth's leaders directly. Now he stood before them, a tired-looking man who had served the hegemony for decades. "The fleet heading your way consists of over 300 warships. Battlecruisers, carriers, planet crackers. They have orders to sterilize your world if necessary." "Why are you telling us this?" Dr. Chen asked suspiciously. Corex was quiet for a long moment. "Because 40 years ago the Kethmoran saved my life when they had every reason to let me die. Because I've spent decades watching the Council destroy anyone who dares to suggest there might be a better way to live. Because what you've accomplished here," he gestured around the room, "proves everything I once believed was wrong." The human leaders exchanged glances. They had known this day might come. The integration of Kethmoran refugees had not been kept secret from the galaxy. Trade ships and explorers from Council space had visited Earth, carrying word back to the core systems that humans were not only helping the exiles but prospering alongside them. "What do you recommend?" President Martinez asked. "Surrender," Corex replied bluntly. "The hegemony fleet alone could reduce your planet to molten rock. Adding the Federation forces makes resistance impossible. Save your species. Give up the Kethmoran and live." But Commander Thelrain stood up slowly. "No," he said quietly. "We will not ask humans to die for us. We have caused enough suffering. My people can return to exile rather than see this beautiful world burned." "Like hell," interrupted Admiral Kim. "With respect, Commander, Earth made a choice 5 years ago. We don't abandon our friends because bullies show up to threaten us." President Martinez nodded. "Admiral Kim is right. The Kethmoran are not refugees anymore. They're citizens of Earth. We don't negotiate away our citizens." What followed was the most intense planning session in human history. Military experts studied the approaching fleet and calculated odds that made everyone nervous. Scientists worked frantically to weaponize technologies that had been developed for peaceful purposes. Kethmoran engineers shared military applications of their biotechnology that they had hoped never to use again. But the real surprise came from an unexpected source. Admiral Corex had not come alone. Hidden in his ship's cargo bay were data files containing complete intelligence on the approaching fleet, ship specifications, command codes, tactical plans, and most importantly, the location of a critical weakness. "The fleet is being commanded from the Dreadnought Absolute Authority," Corex explained, projecting holographic displays of the massive warship. "If that ship is disabled, the entire fleet's coordination network will collapse. They'll be reduced to individual units acting without central command." "How do we get close enough to disable a ship that size?" asked Admiral Kim. The answer came from an unlikely alliance. Earth's orbital defense platforms had been enhanced with Kethmoran biotechnology, creating hybrid systems that appeared to be simple space stations but could actually move and fight like living creatures. Meanwhile, the human industrial capacity had been used to grow entire fleets of bioships using Kethmoran designs. "We have approximately 450 vessels that can Engage in space combat, reported General Harrison. Against 300 enemy ships, those are better odds than anyone expected. But Commander Thelrain shook his head. You don't understand. These aren't just any ships. Each hegemony battlecruiser carries enough firepower to devastate a continent. Their shields can absorb direct hits from fusion weapons. Our bioships are designed for rescue operations, not warfare. Then we don't fight them ship to ship, Admiral Kim replied. We fight them like guerrillas. Hit and run. Use our speed and maneuverability. Make them chase us while our real weapon gets into position. The real weapon was audacious beyond belief. Human engineers and Kethmoran biotechnicians had spent 3 years growing a special vessel in the deepest ocean trenches. It was technically a bioship, but one designed for a single purpose. The Earth's promise was the size of a small moon and had been designed to approach enemy vessels while appearing to be nothing more than a large asteroid. You want to ram their command ship with a disguised bioship? Corex asked in amazement. Not ram, Dr. Chen corrected. Board. The Earth's promise is carrying the largest military force Earth has ever assembled. Marines from every nation equipped with hybrid human Kethmoran technology. They're going to take that ship from the inside. The final 3 days before the fleet's arrival were a blur of preparation. Every orbital platform was armed and supplied. Every space-capable vessel was prepared for combat. On the surface, civilian populations were moved to shelters while anti-orbital weapons were deployed in hidden locations. But perhaps most importantly, Earth sent a message to the approaching fleet. It was broadcast on all frequencies in every language the Galactic Council understood. This is President Martinez, speaking for the people of Earth. You come to our system demanding we surrender our friends and neighbors. You threaten to destroy our world if we refuse to abandon those who have sought sanctuary with us. We reject your demands completely. The Kethmoran are under Earth's protection, and we will defend them with everything we have. If you want them, you'll have to go through us. The message was repeated in Kethmoran as well, spoken by Commander Thelrain. To our people scattered across the galaxy, hear this. We have found a species that understands what we have always believed. That peace is not weakness, that cooperation is not surrender, that some things are worth fighting for, even for those who choose not to fight. When the hegemony fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the solar system, they expected to find a primitive world ready to surrender. Instead, they found something that had never existed before in galactic history. 2 species, one young and aggressive, one ancient and peaceful, working together as equals to defend their shared home. Admiral Corex, now wearing the uniform of Earth's space forces, stood beside Admiral Kim on the bridge of their command ship. You know this is insane, he said quietly. Probably, Kim replied, watching the enemy fleet form up for attack. But sometimes insane is the only option left. The first shots were fired by the hegemony fleet, massive energy beams that lit up space like artificial suns. Earth's bioships scattered like a school of fish, their organic hulls absorbing damage that would have destroyed metal vessels. The orbital platforms opened fire in response, their hybrid weapons sending streams of living energy toward the attacking ships. The battle for Earth had begun. Admiral Kim watched her tactical display as Earth's forces executed the most complex military operation in human history. 3 wings of bioships were engaging the enemy fleet's flanks, drawing their attention while the main force held the center. Meanwhile, deep space sensors tracked the Earth's promise as it drifted toward the enemy command ship, looking exactly like a piece of cosmic debris. Status report, she called out. Heavy damage to the second wing, reported her tactical officer. But the enemy is taking losses too. We've disabled 6 of their escorts and damaged at least 2 battlecruisers.